After the Clone Wars came to an end, and the Republic was transitioned into the Galactic Empire, the clone troopers who served on the front lines of the Clone Wars were sadly phased out and replaced with regular, human-born stormtroopers. This caused a huge amount of anger and stress among the retired clone troopers because all they knew was war, fighting, and combat. This anger brewed very deeply in one set of clone troopers, so much so that they turned to a life of crime and deception. So, let's find out who these brave clone troopers were and how they became crime lords of the Outer Rim. Before we get into it, make sure you're subscribed for more awesome Star Wars lore content. As the Clone Wars raged on throughout the galaxy, a standard trooper who was given the nickname Zeke served as a sergeant in the Grand Army's 1st Platoon. Zeke was one of the many clone troopers created on Kamino and went through pretty much the same training procedures as many of his brothers. For some strange reason, however, Zeke left Kamino with less morality, less loyalty, and vastly more combat expertise than many of his brothers around him. But surprisingly, this went unnoticed by his Jedi General during the war. Let me know down below who you think Zeke's Jedi General was, because I don't think it was Anakin, because someone like him definitely would have noticed. At the end of the war, Zeke and the rest of his men were relieved that the Separatists had fallen and were excited to fight another day should any other threats arise throughout the galaxy. That was until they heard the news that the clones of Jango Fett bred on Kamino were being retired and phased out of the new Imperial Army by Emperor Palpatine. After hearing this news, Zeke and his brothers in the 1st Platoon were shocked and disgusted at how they could be treated this way after literally winning the war for the Republic and allowing the Empire to be created in the first place. Because of this, Trooper Zeke gathered 26 of his brothers and formed a small raiding group who planned to quit the Imperial Army before they were phased out, refusing to be fired after their great service. On their way out, they planned to do some pretty major damage to Imperial facilities. As these 26 brave clone troopers deserted the Imperial Army, they managed to steal a large cache of Old Republic weaponry, as well as hundreds of crates of clone trooper armor from the war. Once they had built their stash, Zeke, along with his brothers Oak, Jake, Rafe, and Tojo, stole an Imperial transport and made off to the planet Seleucami deep in the Outer Rim. And honestly, I wonder if they came across Cut Lawquane, who was also on Seleucami and is confirmed to be alive after the Battle of Endor, just like Captain Rex in canon. Once on Seleucami, the group came across a remote but very defensible location known as the Black Wind Crater, where they set up a base of operations. Black Wind Crater was absolutely massive and contained a cluster of hot springs, as well as being covered in thick jungle marshland, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to stage an effective attack. In the dense crater jungle, packs of Thalos, native creatures to Seleucami, roamed creepily, posing a threat to any intruders who entered. Now, unfortunately, because this place was literally the perfect place to host a base of operations, another group already found it and had set up their own organization from this crater. The group who set up the base here was known as the Veiled Sorority and was ruled by a pirate queen who was elected from a council of captains. The queen of this organization wore a very elaborate mask while in public to conceal her identity, and if the queen was killed or her term expired, the mask was passed on to the next elected queen, making it a very precious symbol for the group. The mask itself was feared and recognized across the galaxy, but the person under it was never to be known. After the clone troopers realized that both their criminal organization, as well as the pirate queens, couldn't both run from the same location, the clone troopers agreed to join the Veiled Sorority crime group and become their firepower. Zeke, along with his brothers Oak, Jake, Rafe, and Tojo, equipped themselves with blaster pistols, vibro knives, frag grenades, and their clone trooper armor from the war, preparing to defend the base inside of the crater from any external threats so that they could conduct their criminal activities without worry. The clone troopers of the group were initially excited and loved the rush of adrenaline and thrill of being crime lords, striking terror into the galaxy, but things took a very swift and heartbreaking turn as many of their men were killed off by rival crime syndicates and the local wildlife inside of the crater. So, I'll very quickly break down the main 4 remaining clone troopers who served alongside Zeke and what their role was in the crime group. The first is Trooper Oak. After the organization suffered huge losses in the front line of duty, he was forced to step up and become more than just a medic. The crime group's main gunner, a very successful clone during the war, was eventually killed in the line of duty, forcing Oak, the 1st Platoon's medic, to become a gunner, a role that he really wasn't comfortable with. Because Oak was still the only person with medical experience in the crime group, he was forced to continue tending to his injured brothers and the others, but they were very quickly running low on medical supplies and basic healing items. Because of this, Oak reached out to some of the other criminal syndicates in the Outer Rim, hoping to do a deal with them to stop the endless pain and suffering for his brothers. As you can guess, this didn't go down too well with the leaders of the sorority, causing a huge backlash among the groups. It's not clear whether Medic Oak was executed for trying to cooperate with the other criminal syndicates, but knowing these groups, sadly I would not be surprised if they executed him and then placed his body at the entrance to their crater on Seleucami, just to warn any others against trying to flee from the life of crime and deception. These groups are absolutely ruthless, and they wouldn't hesitate to do something just like this. After that is Jake. Jake was considered the smart aleck of the group and carried a large blaster rifle along with his trusty vibro knife, always cracking a joke when the opportunity arose, even during a firefight. Unfortunately for Jake though, his eyesight began to diminish horribly after only a few years in the syndicate, meaning his accuracy with his blaster rifle began to fade, which deeply upset him and made him a bitter old man. Next is Rafe. Rafe was a clone trooper who always saw the negative side of situations during the Clone Wars, and this attitude continued into their time on Seleucami, where he was a very sour, pessimistic, and easily aggravated man. As he aged, these traits only began to get worse. Because of his accelerated aging, he even began to develop a tremor only a few years after the end of the war, again making him horrible with his blaster and unable to serve on the front lines for the crime syndicate. Finally is Tojo. Tojo served with the other troopers in this group during the Clone Wars, and during the war was known for being very level-headed and able to think under pressure. These traits of course carried on to his time as a crime lord, where he was always stable on his trigger and knew how to win a firefight from pretty much any situation, even at a horrible disadvantage, like not having the high ground. Unfortunately, as another effect of the accelerated aging, his memory began to diminish and he was unable to complete more complex negotiations and jobs because of it, and his combat strategy soon began to fade, as he could no longer plan out very advanced combat techniques and maneuvers as an effect of his bad memory. As the years dragged on, the accelerated aging very quickly caught up with these troopers, making their lives as crime lords a horrible struggle, with their physical bodies shooting past the age of 80, making every movement a strain. With time continuing to drag on, Zeke and the others became very distant and cold, having watched all of their brothers die around them from both old age and from fatalities in their line of work. Having witnessed this, a large resentment for the Empire grew within them, but they just didn't know how they could fight back, apart from the criminal activities that they were already participating in. They were already a massive thorn in the side of the Empire, but they began to absolutely hate Palpatine and everything his Empire stood for. Finally, Zeke's time as a frontline operative for the crime syndicate came to an abrupt end after he was viciously attacked by a Thalos inside of the crater, bringing him right to the edge of his life and tragically taking away his left arm. At this point, he was a completely broken man and dreaded every moment of his life. Although Zeke had no problem with the crime, the thing that struck him was having to watch all of his brothers die around him. So those were the clone troopers who became crime lords after Order 66 and the Empire. Make sure you let me know down below if you want to hear more about what some of the clone troopers did after Order 66 and the creation of the Empire. Many of them weren't happy at all with how Palpatine treated them and completely phased them out of the clone army, despite being loyal soldiers for the whole war. Thanks so much for watching, really hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers guys, hope to see you in the next one.